In the vast blue expanse of the Bay of Bengal lies a small forgotten world. It is an island cloaked in a dense green blanket of mangrove forest. This is North Sentinel Island. It is part of India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands, yet it exists in a time all its own. The island is not large, only about the size of Manhattan. But its small size holds one of humanity's greatest mysteries. For tens of thousands of years, a small group of people has lived here, completely isolated from the rest of us. They are a living link to our most ancient past, a time when all humans lived directly from the land. The world outside has changed in ways we can scarcely imagine. We have built cities that scrape the sky and machines that let us fly. We have connected our entire planet with invisible threads of information. But on North Sentinel Island, none of this matters. The rhythm of life is dictated by the sun, the moon, and the tides. The people here, known as the Sentinelese, have chosen a different path. They have actively rejected contact with the outside world. Their island is not just a home, it is a fortress. It is a sanctuary they have defended for countless generations, preserving a way of life that has vanished almost everywhere else on Earth. Imagine a place where the hum of a car engine has never been heard. A place where the only lights at night are the stars and the glow of a communal fire. This is the reality for the Sentinelese. They are one of the last uncontacted peoples on the planet. Their story is not one of being lost or forgotten. Instead, it is a powerful story of choice. They have seen the outside world approach their shores many times, and each time their message has been clear and unwavering. They wish to be left alone, to continue their existence as their ancestors did, in harmony with their island home. This resolute independence makes North Sentinel Island utterly unique. It is a living laboratory of human culture, but one we cannot and should not enter. Our knowledge of the Sentinelese is pieced together from fleeting glimpses from afar, from the stories of those who dared to approach, and from the poignant evidence they have left behind. Their island is a testament to human resilience and the deep instinctual need for a people to control their own destiny. It asks us a profound question. In a world that is more connected than ever, is there still room for a people who simply say no? The Sentinelese are a people shrouded in mystery, yet their message is crystal clear. For as long as we have known of their existence, they have resisted all attempts at contact. They are hunter-gatherers, living a life that has sustained them for what scientists believe could be up to 60,000 years. Their skills are honed by millennia of experience. They hunt wild pigs in the dense forest, fish in the shallow lagoons with expertly crafted bows and arrows, and gather wild plants, fruits and honey. Their entire world is contained within the shores of their island, and it provides everything they need to survive and to thrive. Their isolation is not an accident of geography. It is a deliberate and consistent choice. Outsiders who have approached their island have almost always been met with a show of force. The Sentinelese are known to be watchful and wary. From the cover of the trees, they observe any vessel that nears their coast. If it comes too close, they do not hesitate to act. Men emerge onto the beach, armed with longbows and arrows tipped with metal. They shout warnings in a language no outsider understands. Their posture, their actions, and their aim all communicate a single powerful sentiment: go away. This is their home, and intruders are not welcome. This fierce defense of their home is not born of aggression for its own sake. It is likely a learned response, a lesson taught through generations of difficult and often violent encounters with the outside world. To us, a visiting boat might seem to carry gifts and good intentions, but to the Sentinelese, who have no context for our world, such an arrival may look like a threat. Their history with outsiders is a story of disruption, disease, and violence. It is no wonder then that their first instinct is to protect themselves, their families, and their way of life from the unknown dangers that arrive from across the sea. Their very existence challenges our modern assumptions. In a world that values growth, expansion, and connection, the Sentinelese represent a different kind of success. It is the success of sustainability, of self-sufficiency, and of cultural continuity. They have not asked for our technology, our medicine, or our religions. They have simply asked for the right to continue living as they always have. Their story is a powerful reminder that there are other ways of being human, and that our way is not the only one. Their rejection of our world is, in many ways, a reflection of its own complicated and often destructive history. The first recorded encounter that gave the world a glimpse into the Sentinelese response to outsiders occurred long ago. In the year 1867, an Indian merchant ship called the Nineveh was caught in a storm. The powerful monsoon winds and churning seas drove the vessel onto the coral reef surrounding North Sentinel Island. The ship was wrecked. The captain, the crew, and the passengers, numbering over 100 people, managed to struggle ashore. They had survived the shipwreck, but a new and perhaps greater challenge awaited them on the strange island. They were exhausted and disoriented, unaware that they were not alone. After several days of trying to salvage what they could from their broken ship, the survivors faced their first encounter with the island's inhabitants. At dawn, they were suddenly attacked by a group of Sentinelese men. These men were described as being completely unclothed, with red-painted bodies and short hair. They were armed with bows and iron-tipped arrows. A fierce fight ensued. The shipwreck crew had to defend themselves with sticks and stones. Several of them were wounded in the sudden and terrifying assault. The Sentinelese were defending their territory from what they clearly perceived as a large group of invaders. The captain of the Nineveh understood their desperate situation. They were trapped on a hostile island, facing a people who wanted them gone. He and a few others managed to repair a small boat and set off to find help. Miraculously, they were picked up by a passing vessel. A Royal Navy ship was dispatched to rescue the remaining survivors. When the rescue party arrived, they found the shipwreck crew holding their ground, constantly on guard against further attacks from the forest. The Sentinelese had retreated into the jungle, but their message had been delivered. The survivors were rescued, and the story of the hostile islanders spread. This dramatic event established the reputation of the Sentinelese. It was a clear demonstration of their willingness to use force to repel intruders. They were not passive or timid. They were active defenders of their home. The iron tips on their arrows also presented a puzzle. The island has no natural iron deposits. This suggested that they were resourceful, salvaging metal from shipwrecks or other objects that washed ashore. This first major encounter set the stage for all future interactions. It was a warning that to land on North Sentinel Island was to enter a place that would defend itself without hesitation. 13 years after the Nineveh shipwreck, another more disturbing chapter was written in the island's history. In 1880, a British colonial administrator named Maurice Vidal Portman led an armed expedition to North Sentinel Island. Portman was an officer in charge of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and he had a peculiar and ultimately harmful interest in the indigenous tribes. He wanted to study them, to measure them, and to civilize them. His expedition landed on the island with the goal of making peaceful contact, but his methods would prove to be anything but peaceful. For several days, Portman and his men tracked the Sentinelese through the dense jungle. The islanders, sensing the intruders, repeatedly vanished into the forest, avoiding contact. Finally, the expedition stumbled upon an elderly couple and 4 small children who had been left behind. In an act that is shocking to us today, Portman decided to kidnap them. He brought the 6 individuals back to his headquarters in Port Blair. His intention was to study them, but the result was a complete disaster. The isolated Sentinelese had no immunity to the diseases of the outside world. Diseases that were common and harmless to Portman and his men. Almost immediately, the elderly man and woman became gravely ill. Their bodies could not fight off the foreign germs. Tragically, they both died. Portman, perhaps realizing his catastrophic mistake, decided to return the 4 children to the island. He left them on the beach with a collection of gifts. It is impossible to know what happened to the children after that. Did they survive? What stories did they tell their people about the strange world they had seen? And what diseases might they have carried back with them, potentially causing an epidemic that could have devastated their small population? We will never have the answers. This event was a profound and terrible lesson. It demonstrated the immense danger that contact posed to the Sentinelese. Good intentions, even those cloaked in the name of science and discovery, could lead to death and destruction. For the Sentinelese, this experience would have been deeply traumatic. The disappearance of 6 of their people, followed by the return of only the children, would have solidified their view of outsiders as a source of great danger and sorrow. Portman's actions likely reinforced their isolationism for generations, making them even more determined to keep the outside world at bay. The 20th century brought new kinds of visitors to the shores of North Sentinel Island, but the response from the islanders remained the same. In 1974, a film crew from National Geographic arrived. They came with a team of anthropologists, armed guards, and a boat laden with gifts. Their goal was to film a documentary called Man in Search of Man and to establish friendly contact. As their boat approached the reef, they began leaving presents in the water. A toy car, a live pig, some coconuts, and a doll. The Sentinelese reaction was swift and unambiguous. The islanders came out onto the beach and fired a volley of arrows at the boat. The pig was hit by an arrow and then promptly buried in the sand. The doll was also shot with an arrow and buried. They showed no interest in the toy car. They did, however, retrieve the coconuts, which seemed to be the only gift they valued. One of the film directors, while trying to film the scene, was struck in the thigh by an arrow. The message was as clear as it had been a century earlier. The film crew retreated, having captured dramatic footage of the islanders' fierce defense of their home, but failing completely to make peaceful contact. A few years later, in 1981, another shipwreck provided a different kind of opportunity for the Sentinelese. A cargo ship named the Primrose ran aground on the coral reef during a storm. The crew was stranded for several days, watching with growing alarm as small groups of Sentinelese men gathered on the beach. The men carried bows, arrows, and spears. They even began building small boats, seemingly preparing to board the shipwreck. The crew sent out a frantic radio call for help, and they were eventually rescued by a helicopter. The ship, however, was left behind. For the Sentinelese, the abandoned Primrose became a valuable resource. It was like a mountain of metal delivered directly to their doorstep. Over the years, observers flying over the island noticed that the Sentinelese were using metal salvaged from the shipwreck. Their arrowheads and spear tips, once likely made of bone or stone, were now clearly fashioned from iron. This showed their incredible resourcefulness and intelligence. They did not need outsiders to teach them. They observed, learned and adapted, taking what was useful from the outside world on their own terms and using it to strengthen their own way of life. For decades, every attempt to get close to the Sentinelese had ended in failure or hostility. But in the early 1990s, something remarkable happened. An Indian anthropologist named Triloknath Pandit had been leading contact expeditions for years. His approach was different. It was patient and respectful. His teams would approach the island by boat, but they would not try to land. Instead, they would drop bags of coconuts into the water as a gesture of goodwill. For a long time, the Sentinelese would watch from a distance and only collect the coconuts after the boats had moved away. Then, on January 4th, 1991, the pattern changed. As Pandit's team dropped coconuts into the sea, a group of Sentinelese men and women came out of the forest. This time, they did not carry their bows and arrows in a threatening posture. Instead, they waded unarmed into the shallow water to collect the floating gifts. For the first time in recorded history, a peaceful, close-range interaction was taking place. The boat crew was able to hand coconuts directly to the islanders. It was a breathtaking moment of trust, a small bridge built across an immense cultural divide. Pandit and his team returned for another similar encounter a month later. Again, the Sentinelese met them in the water without weapons, eagerly accepting the coconuts. It seemed as though a breakthrough had been made. It was a fragile, tentative peace. The Sentinelese seemed to be signaling that they understood the visitors were not a threat, at least not as long as they brought coconuts and kept a respectful distance. It was not a full welcome, but it was a significant change from the volleys of arrows that had greeted previous visitors. The world watched with hope, wondering if this was the beginning of a new relationship. However, this window of peaceful contact did not last long. Soon after these successful encounters, the Indian government decided to change its policy. Officials began to question the wisdom and ethics of continuing the contact missions. They were concerned about the risk of introducing diseases to the vulnerable islanders. They also recognized that the Sentinelese had a right to their privacy and their isolation. By the late 1990s, the gift-dropping expeditions were stopped. The brief moment of peace was over, not because of hostility from the Sentinelese, but because of a growing respect for their right to be left alone. For nearly 2 decades after the official contact missions ended, North Sentinel Island was left in relative peace. The Indian government enforced a protection zone, making it illegal to go within 5 nautical miles of its shores. The world seemed to have finally accepted the Sentinelese wish for isolation. But in November 2018, this peace was shattered by one individual's misguided mission. A young American missionary named John Allen Chow decided he was called by God to travel to the island and preach Christianity to the Sentinelese people. Chow knew the risks. He was aware that contact was illegal and that the Sentinelese were hostile to outsiders. He wrote in his diary about his fear, but also his deep conviction that he had to go. He hired local fishermen to illegally transport him to the island's vicinity. On his first attempt to approach the shore in a kayak, he was met by men with bows and arrows. A young boy shot an arrow at him, which struck the Bible he was holding. He retreated, but he was not deterred. He believed that the island was Satan's last stronghold and that he had to try again. He paid the fishermen to take him back one last time. He instructed them to leave without him. From a distance, the fishermen later saw the islanders dragging Chow's body across the beach. His quest to bring his message to the Sentinelese had ended in his own death. The event sparked a global debate. Some saw Chow as a martyr, a man of faith who died for his beliefs. Others saw him as a reckless intruder who ignored countless warnings and foolishly trespassed on the land of a protected and vulnerable people, risking their lives as well as his own. The Indian government faced a difficult situation. There were calls to retrieve Chow's body, but authorities quickly realized this was impossible. Any attempt to land on the island would endanger the lives of the officials and would also risk a violent confrontation with the Sentinelese. More importantly, it would risk introducing deadly pathogens to the islanders. In the end, the government decided not to make any attempt. John Allen Chow's body was left on the island, a tragic and final testament to the Sentinelese's unwavering resolve to remain apart from a world that they do not know and do not wish to join. The tragic death of John Allen Chow served as a stark and powerful reminder to the world. It highlighted exactly why the Indian government's policy of protection is so critically important. For years, India has enforced a hands-off, eyes-on policy. This means they monitor the island from a distance, primarily through aerial surveys, to ensure the population appears healthy and safe, especially after natural disasters like the 2004 tsunami. But they strictly forbid anyone from going ashore. This law is not just about protecting visitors from the Sentinelese. It is fundamentally about protecting the Sentinelese from us. The history of contact between isolated tribes and the modern world is a story filled with tragedy. Across the globe, when indigenous peoples who have lived in isolation are suddenly exposed to outsiders, the consequences are often catastrophic. They have no immunity to common diseases like the flu, measles, or even the common cold. An illness that might make us sick for a week could wipe out their entire population. The lessons learned from the devastating impact of disease on other Andaman tribes and on indigenous peoples worldwide inform the current policy. The risk is simply too great. There is also a deep ethical principle at stake. The Sentinelese have demonstrated clearly and consistently for over 150 years that they do not want contact. They have a right to self-determination. They have a right to choose their own way of life and to reject ours. To force contact upon them, no matter how well-intentioned, would be a violation of their fundamental human rights. It would be an act of arrogance to assume that our way of life is better or that they need our help. Their survival for millennia on their own terms is proof that they are capable and self-sufficient. In the end, the story of North Sentinel Island teaches us a lesson in humility. It reminds us that there are still mysteries in this world and that some mysteries should be left unsolved. The greatest gift we can give the Sentinelese is the one thing they have always asked for, to be left alone. Respecting their wishes means accepting that our curiosity and our desire to connect must have limits. By protecting their isolation, we are preserving a unique and ancient part of our shared human heritage. We are allowing one of the last free peoples of the earth to continue their journey undisturbed on their island that says no to the world.